Are you stepping into a new leadership role? Whether it's with your existing company or a new company, when you step up into a new role, this is an ideal time to set yourself up for success. Here is a real life coaching session where I help somebody do just that.
Welcome to Leadership Mindset 2.0. Practical neuroscience and psychology to transform you from a tactical doer into a strategic leader. Here is your host, former social entrepreneur of the year and coach to some of the world's top executives, R. Michael Anderson.
Hello leaders, Michael here. And one of the things that I get asked the most from leaders is, how do I succeed in a new role? Now, there's really interesting things when you step into a new role, because oftentimes it's a real opportunity for you to step up your game. If it's a new company or it's a new department, you often don't have some of the legacy that comes with how people thought of you, what your past achievements were or were not. You get to really write your own script from a blank page. So what I have now is I am going to be coaching Paul. This is a live coaching session. What we have done with this session, as we've done with a couple of the previous ones, is Paul's not his real name. But because we want these coaching sessions to be open and vulnerable, what we've done is we've replaced his voice with an AI voice. But this is my voice. It's my real voice. This is what he said. So you really get a chance to listen on our conversation, and the client, in this case, Paul, can be open and vulnerable and share what he's really going through. And I go through with him what he needs to do to be successful in this. And as a leader, maybe you are preparing for a new position yourself, or maybe you have somebody new joining you. It's often really important for you to understand both sides. So if you often have new executives joining you, you can get an insight into what's going through their minds so you can make them be more successful as well. So here we go.
Going all the way back to the beginning, my career started in clinical counseling, and really from a desire of wanting to help people. That's really where it came from. And over time, really enjoy that work, but also kind of realized a desire to want to work more proactively in the space and to really prevent people from getting into those stuck points that you often are working through in a clinical environment. And so equipping, empowering people quickly became a vision of mine, one that I wanted to really pursue. I spent about a decade in higher education before moving into the consumer-produced goods space. And in that space was able to really lead the talent side of the house, which included learning talent, acquisition, organizational development. Really, talent acceleration is probably the best way to think about it. And was able to do that for about 4 years. But have most recently been given an opportunity to join a retail organization with about 5,000 headcount across about 35 states. To lead all of HR, which would include obviously talent, but also operations, benefits, the entire scope of human resources. And so really excited about, the opportunities that that's going to present.
Great. I appreciate that. Now, how can we make this a powerful session together?
Great question. I think moving into this role, just making sure that honestly, I can find the balance between acclimation as quickly as possible, but then also understanding that as a new leader of this function, I was brought in for a purpose and to execute on that purpose, but to not do so too expeditiously or without the context of culture, and kind of finding the balance between, how to acclimate as quickly as possible, but also being willing to make those sometimes difficult decisions also as quickly as possible to continue pushing forward.
Set the scene a little bit. Are you replacing somebody? Is this a new role? Are they bringing you in to tackle specific challenges? Like, what are you going to have to deal with right off the bat?
Yeah. It is a replacement role. However, it is also an upgraded role to senior VP level. My understanding is HR is functioning well. I think core HR functions are intact. I think they're doing great work. Not to say that there's probably not some opportunities for efficiencies and process improvements, but I think core HR is pretty much solid. Honestly, I think what I was attractive to them for was that talent focus, that growth focus. How do we leverage HR not just as an admin function, but also as an accelerant to the organization and leveraging people as that number one resource to continue pushing the organization forward towards goals. So I think that's where the focal point is. And I think some of it is getting my feet set first with just kind of those core HR capabilities and functions and making sure that we're tight. Because, as my view, it's kind of like a Maslow's hierarchy of needs if we're not getting FMLA and unemployment, Social Security coming out of paychecks and things like that, taken care of first. It's hard to talk about growth pathways and succession and leadership development, right? Like you got to kind of get those foundations set first. So I want to start there, but then quickly kind of move into, people growth, people development to continue pushing the organization forward.
Who are you going to report to?
I'll report to the Executive Vice President of Operations, but it's kind of a unique situation in that it will have a seat at the executive table, but currently reporting to the EVP of Operations. But I will be in executive team meetings, have a space at the table as an HR leader, so it's moving into an executive level role.
Okay, great. And the executive VP of Ops, did you have some communication with them? Did you interview with them, et cetera?
I did, yes. So started with a recruiting agency, talked to them extensively to kick things off, but then pretty soon after had 2 separate interviews with the EVP of Operations. Also interviewed with the chief merchant of this organization and also the CEO of the organization. So they brought me in for a full day of interviews. They were great. I mean, it was more conversational than anything. And it was just, kind of an affirmation that this is probably a good pick to move towards.
Good. Well, if you reflect back on those conversations, what a lot of executives get when I work with them before they're getting on the job is to make sure that they are laser focused on strategically what they need to be. And I'm going to talk about your identity going in, because, what's really fun about going into a new place is you don't have any of the legacy things going on. So what this is a great place for us to really solidify, how you're going to show up, what your short, medium term plan is, so you can do that with confidence and you can really show up with that presence and all those types of things. So reflecting on those conversations, was there any little clues? Because normally when whether it's a placement or something else, maybe the one person, there's probably stuff they liked, they didn't like, there's probably concerns they have. They're probably like, oh, this is going well, this isn't going well. So is there anything we can tease out that would really be important to them that maybe they have told you specifically or didn't tell you specifically?
Yeah, I think a couple things. Culture is definitely one. How do we continue to expand culture? What does that mean? I'm not 100% sure yet. I think that's part of what I've got to acclimate to pretty quickly to understand what does that mean? Where do we want it to be? But that's the a phrase that came up pretty frequently within the interviewing and vetting for this role, I think, too. Talent acceleration. I keep coming back to that phrase. It was key there. How do we build growth pathways, succession planning, leadership development? They pride themselves on running lean, which I think is great. But I also think, that we need to make sure that we're building an infrastructure and resources and, avenues to make sure that we're leveraging talent to the fullest extent to continue pushing the organization forward. And that was something that kind of came through pretty resoundingly in the conversations.
What do you mean by that? They feel that they have good people, but their leaders, they're not leading enough. I hear you in concept. What does that mean?
So let me give a little bit more history. So the company started back in the early 1900s. So it is an older organization, but, a lot of success has happened recently. And I think what I've learned is that a lot of the workforce is very tenured, which is good and also maybe not so good sometimes, right? So I think there's, potentially frankly, just some comfort, that I think some people may have with how things are, how they've been, how, this is the way it's always been. So that's the way that we're always going to continue to do it. I don't know that the leadership of the organization necessarily feels like that's the key to moving forward, right? And so kind of thinking about if we want to continue pushing forward in the retail space, become the leader in the space, we're going to have to, continue to push, but maybe also push in a different direction, in a different way. And I think some of that is just, do we have the right people in the right seats to be able to execute on that right to? And it may not be that we're offboarding people, but maybe they're just not in the right role and we need to shift them around to a different role and maybe get them an opportunity to kind of impact the organization in a different capacity than what they're in currently. And so all that will take time. I'm not saying that's a quick fix, but I think just kind of hearing an aspiration to move towards like a talent accelerated organization in which, we're leveraging people to the fullest extent, providing them the resources for growth and development, elevating leadership across the board and really providing the organization with a pretty solid foundation from a people standpoint to continue achieving those, retail goals, financial goals, market share goals, whatever we're targeting to continue moving forward. People are going to be the key driver of that, right? I mean, having good product to put on shelves is key. Granted, but I also feel, strongly that if you don't have the right people executing across the board, you're not going to hit your long-term goals in the way that you could if you were actually accelerating people across the board.
Let's start with the EVP, and I have the same question for CEO. How long has your EVP of Ops been there?
I think about 10 years, maybe. Yeah, in various capacities. But I think, don't quote me on this, but I think most recently the EVP role, I think he's been in that position for a couple years, 2 or 3 years.
I'd be curious what company and industry they came from, because 10 years is a long time. But if somebody's been in there for like a year and they just came from like company X, then you can look and see what company X did. Because normally what they do is they come over and they want to do it like their last thing. So 10 years is probably enough where a lot of that's out there, but that's just something you want to keep in mind and maybe look.
Yeah, that's a good call.
What about the CEO?
So CEO's been there for 40 years. He's very tenured. Talking back to the tenure of the workforce, he's probably one of the most, if not the most tenured individuals within the enterprise. So, but I will tell you, in that conversation I had with him, has not lost any enthusiasm. I think that's one of the things you would be concerned about with for decades, of doing pretty much anything. Is the fire still there? Is the desire and the drive still there? It's there. I mean, I think the conversation we had, it was a little bit business focused, but it was passion. And you could just tell, just like having a good opportunity just to kind of pick his brain about what he sees as the future of the organization was just a whole lot of fun. So completely extinguish any fears that I had about, is it just a check in the box situation for this individual after 40 years of being at the company? Not at all. I think he's very much still actively engaged, and I admire that and respect that to a high degree.
So he also seems like a relationship type person. He seems like a storyteller, relationship type person.
Yes, I would say that's very true. I personally appreciate that. And not just in leadership, you get bombarded with, we got to get these things done. This just needs to get done. We need to make it happen. And I think sometimes you lose focus of the story and the why behind that and how you communicate it. And I think especially at the CEO level, if you can model that, it makes it a lot easier for your executive leaders to continue doing that across the organization, so that we're not just telling people, we got to do this thing and we got to get it done by this date, but here's why we're doing it, and here's what impact it's going to have, and here's what opportunity is going to present to you. To be able to continue impacting the enterprise in a very positive direction. So yes, 100% to your point, that was one of the things I really appreciated about that conversation was the, kind of holistic view, the storytelling component that came with it. And just, how he married that to passion was key. He's got a reputation of being a very kind of thoughtful CEO. And what I mean by that is, I think, and not a right or wrong, it's just different. I think some CEOs are quick to jump in with an opinion or a desire or a way forward that they would like for the organization to go, and 100% their prerogative. They could do it the way they want to do it. I think with him, though, my understanding is he takes a very reflective approach where he tries to allow his executive team and other leaders across the organization to make decisions and to, propose ideas, present rationales for certain things that they feel like needs to have to become a decision point, and really kind of follows their lead a lot of the time. So to me, I appreciate that, as someone who tries to embrace that kind of entrepreneurial spirit, that freedom to, build, innovate, create, like that means a lot to me. And I definitely got a very strong sense from him that that was also the way that he likes to operate.
Good. One thing that comes up to me, so your perception of the conversation, even with the CEO though, was that they may need, and I'm putting your words in your mouth, outside talent to fill in some of the leadership gaps. Is that accurate?
Potentially, I think hard for me to say without, doing my due diligence, but I think they're really looking at what does the future look like as we continue to accelerate growth. They're on a good trajectory. I mean, financially, market share wise, I think they're moving in a very positive direction. But I also think that there's appetite for more, right? Like, how do we keep pushing? How do we continue to take more of the market share? And again, one of the things you run into, and not to say that tenure is a bad thing. I don't mean it that way, but I think what got you here won't get you there, right? Like that's the saying, right? And I think a lot of times you have to kind of look in the mirror and say, do we have people in the right seats? Do we need to make some shifts? Do we need to move people around? Do we need to look for outside talent? I don't know, but I think from my understanding, it was a lot's on the table, right? In terms of how we look at talent, how we position talent, how we recruit talent, how we leverage talent, which again, to me is just incredibly exciting, to be able to have a part in that for an enterprise that is already excelling to a certain degree and wanting to keep pushing in that direction. I mean, that's like, a slow pitch in a home run derby. You know what I mean? Like, it's let's knock it out of the park.
I get that. The one thing that comes up to me, Paul, is that people that are relationship oriented, I understand this is just something for you to keep in the back of your mind, is that he seems like a very relationship oriented guy. And like you said, none of this is positive or negative. This is all stuff you got to keep in mind.
Yep.
And if he's been there 40 years, he has a lot of existing relationships. So as somebody who's in there, maybe going to be evaluating talent and helping where that goes is to go with a bit of a cautious look, because he may have emotional ties, and especially if he's very relationship oriented, and he might have competing intentions. He might want, a better level of this, and he may have really tight ties with people.
Very well said. No, I think that's a great observation. And, I mean, it's people, no matter the situation, I think you have to be very purposeful, with how you move forward with people decisions one way or the other. I mean, everything from promotion to an offboarding and everything in between. You don't take those lightly. And I think that's the hard part is, how do you get up to speed as quickly as possible in this role to be able to have the background, the knowledge, the cultural alignment to be able to understand enough to make those kind of decisions. But yeah, you're right. And I think, the flip side of that with culture, you're trying to build culture. One of the quickest ways to erode culture is if people start feeling fear, and they look around and see, well, man, all these people I worked with for 15 years are not here anymore, right? Like, how hard is it going to be to build a positive work culture if that's what they're experiencing, And they're looking around and saying, man, I worked with Michael for 15 years and he just, got let go last week. And I don't even understand the rationale or the reason. Nobody will talk to me or tell me the reason that he got let go. So, I'm fearful now for my job and I don't feel like I have a way forward here anymore. Maybe I should start looking, right? And then you get this like kind of flight risk, if you will, from a talent standpoint, of the people that you would want to keep, even if you go in that direction. So yeah, not trying to minimize that. I don't want to come across as that's a simple task. I know it's not. And I think you're spot on that you have to be very careful and systemic with how you do that. Because if you take some wrong steps, you will, quite frankly, destroy a culture, pretty quickly.
Yeah. And also, what I want to make sure we're doing is mapping their individual personalities, because I think it's like what you talked about. Absolutely, you always want to do. And we want to see, like, if you could compare, we talked a little bit about the CEO's personality. If you could describe just the VP of Ops type of personality, maybe just reflecting, like, what is his main KPI? What is he evaluated on? Then sometimes you get a sense of him personally. Maybe he really likes growth. He really likes looking good in front of, maybe you can just tease a couple of things out so that you can be a great team member.
Yeah, good question. One of the things he said to me during the interview process is kind of an encapsulation, I think, of how he thinks. He said, nothing happens until we sell something. And I think, that's a great way to look at it, right? He said that multiple times, and I thought it was a great, again, kind of insight into his headspace. He is in the field a lot, traveling to locations. Like I said, I think it's 32 states that this organization has a reach across. That's broad. So he's out and about a lot. I think, primary focus for him is just, opening stores, selling product, making sure that we are operating effectively. He leads regional vice presidents that all have responsibilities over their areas and the stores within those regions. It kind of the front line, if you will, of the enterprise, really, and just the kind of the customer-facing experience. So I think to your point, he is a very entrepreneurial individual, in thinking about how do we move the organization forward. I think he's a very driven individual. I think he's I don't want to say hard charging, but I think he has a vision for where he wants to go, and he's not afraid to pursue that at 1,000 miles an hour, right? And I think trying to find ways to ensure success in those pursuits is probably top focus for him, right? Whether it's through people, through finances, through strategy, through, product alignment. That's kind of made my sense of him is just, that's kind of the way that he thinks and the way that he operates.
Yeah, sounds like he's really focused on sales. He probably moves fast. He's
Yep.
aggressive, So, you're going to want to make sure your conversations, your actions with him are mirror that. It sounds like, and you can add more. You got good intuition, I know, about. He's probably not a huge small talk person. He's a let's get down to business. Let's sell some stuff. Let's make some money. So yeah. What have they talked about like a 30, 60, 90-day plan or like an immediate type of quick? Because the thing is, you're going to be going to a new place and you're probably going to like, oh, we need to do these long-term things. We got to make sure you get some quick wins off the bat so you
100%.
get on the scoreboard.
We have been talking about it. I always like to come in resourced as much as I can. And so one of the things I've been doing in my time away has been building out a 90-day plan and kind of figuring out like what I want to tackle. And I told the organization, I said, look, I'm not saying like this is non-negotiable. That's not what I'm trying to do at all, but I just want to have something to start with. And if you want to amend it, let's amend it. But I just want to have at least a roadmap for us to work together through. Right. So the way that I built it, it's based on a book by Michael Watkins called The First 90 Days, which I would highly recommend if you haven't checked it out. It's a really, really good book, and the whole premise of the book is to get to this break-even point as quickly as possible and break even. And what he means is you're contributing back to the organization as much as they invested to bring you to the organization, right? So, recruitment, onboarding, that's a high-cost exercise, right? And so you want to try to bring as much value back to the organization that they've already invested in you as quickly as possible to get to that break-even point. And so for the way I've kind of laid it out, the first 30 days for me is really just cultural acclimation, just learning the business and granular, like product lineup, finances, OPEX versus COGS. Going in depth as much as possible just to understand how the business operates. Two in that though is people, learning the teams, my immediate HR teams across the enterprise, meetings with key collaborators that I would be working with, cultural, cornerstones of the enterprise that I need to connect with and make sure that I can understand their perspectives. So that's really the goal for the first 30 to 60 is really looking at strategy, starting to build out HR strategy, looking at quick, easy wins, kind of evaluating the team. Do we have the right people in the right seats? Are there current capability gaps that we need to start to close? I think at beyond 60 days, you can really start to get a better bearing around that. And then 60 to 90 is really where I want to create an HR charter and strategic plan to where we will have a roadmap that we can share with the team for what will the future look like of HR, what do we want to accomplish? What are the gaps we need to close? And even in that, I think I probably will include org charts for what I think we could move towards and new capabilities that we could, potentially recruit for. So that's kind of the way I've got it now. Now, definitely it's a living, breathing document. I don't want it to come across as that's the final plan, but I definitely wanted to have kind of a general approach to how we were going to tackle this, this task.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. And during that, that all sounds really, really well thought out. And it's really good if you have like specific deliverables or specific things. So it's like, oh, hey, I've been here, 80 days and he's got this good plan and he's done this. It's just good to like say, yes, he's got that. And sometimes there are even small things that look big, just so you can get something completed that really, really goes far.
Agreed. And I think some of that, not that, you don't even want to come into a role trying to like prove yourself, right? But I think if you can build credibility through those early, easy wins, that's going to make it easier to do the big things in the long run, right? So I think to your point, yeah, making sure that they feel confident they made the right pick can be accomplished through, hey, if we just did this, or hey, we automated this, or we made this handoff a little bit more smooth from HR to finance or whatever it is. Like those are things that, you get so in the weeds and it's right in front of you. You lose sight of those things. But from an outsider's perspective, you can come in and see that in a way that nobody else has an opportunity to look at it because they've just been so close to it. I think there's definitely opportunities potentially to do those things and to build that credibility and trust to keep pushing in other directions. For sure.
What do you think's is there any part of this role or company or industry or whatever it is that's giving you like a little bit of like anxiety or uncomfortableness?
Not with the company. I think transparently, as I mentioned at the beginning, my background is really in talent, learning, talent acquisition, recruiting, organizational development, workforce forecasting, bringing in this new wrinkle of, I'll just call it traditional HR. Some of what I've been doing the last 2 weeks is looking at FMLA and EEOC and ERISA. There's just a lot of compliance and legal considerations that are now. Not that I wasn't familiar with them or didn't interact with them, but now they're my responsibility, which is different, right? So if we have a failure and get an EEOC charge, that's on me, right? So I think, now it's a matter of, making sure that I feel comfortable and aware of that. And look, here's the truth I'm not going to make up for. A team member that we have on the HR team has been doing this for 10, 20 years. I'm not going to catch up to them in 2 weeks. That's not what I'm saying. But I think I at least need to have an understanding and appreciation for how they do what they do and what I need to know to be able to lead them better. But understanding that my role is not to be in the tactics, is to be in the strategic right. And to make sure that they're aware of that and to not come in acting like I know better than they do. Because that's not the truth. And I don't want them to think that, but also feel a responsibility as a leader of the function to at least have an understanding of what the scope of my function includes.
Okay, so in this episode, we mapped out some of the intellectual side of starting a new role, the plan, the politics, and the strategy. But look, the hardest part isn't the plan, it's the identity. And to me, that's the real fun stuff. So next week, we're going to get into the vulnerability. Paul's going to tell us the areas he's really concerned about in this upcoming role. And he admits he has no experience in a key part of his job. So we're going to coach him on how to lead experts who know more than he does in certain areas, how to overcome imposter syndrome, and how to command executive presence in the boardroom. Now, if you are starting a new role or going to start a new role and you want support like this, I do offer a 5-session one-on-one coaching package that will equip you to really hit the ground running and to enable you to be the leader you want to be in this new chapter of your life. So just reach out to me and ask more about that. In the meantime, we will see you in a week where we finish up Paul's powerful session. Hey, one more thing before we go. If you ever thought about executive coaching, or you are a coach who wants to coach leaders at a higher level, or if you're a business owner or high-level leader that needs to connect with other high-level leaders and you want the tools and skills to do that, then I have something for you. I'm starting my second cohort of the Executive Coaching Certification. This is a 3-month live program where you learn the credibility, the tools, and the presence to sit nose to nose with high-level people and really dig deep with them, form immense connections with them, gain their trust, and get everything that you need to coach them on a powerful, deep level. Now, there's a lot of stuff about coaching out there, for sure, but a lot of it's on the behavioral level. This deep, deep coaching works on the identity level, which is what senior execs crave, but they have difficulty finding. Because this type of coaching requires growth in you so that you can have the presence, the relationship with yourself, so that you can tell them exactly what they need. Not help them with accountability, not helping them with the priorities. They're already high achievers. They have everything that they need. What coaches that try to coach executives lack is they lack that depth. And that's exactly what this program gives. So if this is of at all interest to you, go to the URL rmichaelanderson.com/certification, or somewhere on this page or the show notes, there is a link, and read more about it. We got amazing case studies. If you have any questions, drop me a note. But last year was the first year I ran this, and it went better than my wildest dreams. And the coaches who I'm still in contact with are coaching leaders at a higher level than they thought that they were capable of. And they're doing this every day. So if you have any interest in doing this, check it out, drop me a note, and see if it's right for you. Because it's an amazing investment, both in you and your own growth, as well as your career growth. And maybe I'll see you there.